if you are planning to use artificial intelligence in your venture, how do you go about it? And the biggest question this slide and this presentation is aiming to answer is, do you need AI? Or, I mean, is it even an AI problem? Do you need AI in your solution? If you do, how do you tackle it? How do you solve for it? Everything that I would be presenting in this slide would be something I've learned across all of the experiences I've had in the AI sector. My predominant sectors are education and HR, but everything in these spaces that relate to AI would be something I speak of. So I'd love to be challenged on everything that you see on this slide, because none of this is set in stone, right? I'd love to learn from you guys, because you might have some ventures that you've used AI in very differently than I have. So I'd love to be questioned, challenged on everything that you see on this. So just as like a question to the audience, there's a lot of GDP talks that we've been doing recently, and a lot, you guys must be calculating your market sizes, lots of US dollars you must be talking in. So does anyone know how much artificial intelligence could contribute to the world economy? Like just as a ballpark number. 100 billion, 200 billion, any numbers? 5,000 billion, 500 billion. Okay, I can go down to the next slide, right? So it's going to be a $15.7 trillion contributor to the world economy. And one of the only reasons it's going to be such a large contributor, and this, by the way, is a report I'm guessing came out somewhere in the 2015, 2017 region. So you can imagine the size of what it's going to scale into, because newer ventures are coming up, newer industries are opening up, newer sectors are coming up. So one of the best things about artificial intelligence is it's not an industry in itself only. It is an industry in itself, but it can also, so for example, someone here is doing finance, somebody is doing education. A lot of you guys are doing active education ventures, and I think I've seen lots of you do that. If you're in, say, the healthcare sector, whatever sector you're in, oh, this switches? Okay. So whatever sector you're in, AI will come at the base of these, which means artificial intelligence is strongly industry agnostic, which means if you're doing finance, you can power finance using artificially intelligent decisions. If you're doing education, you can use AI to make learners, learn better, teach students better, have teachers assess assessments a lot better. If you're in healthcare, AI is big on predicting how patients will have certain diseases and XYZ. So there's a lot AI can power just at the base of industries. It can also be an industry in itself. So some applications that I've seen personally in, say, a lot of you are familiar with the education sector, and a lot of you that come from the similar region of this sort would be facing the problem of quality education. So lots of people don't have access to quality education. Even if they do, some teachers don't turn up to school, XYZ. So how AI is, positioned to solve these is more along the lines of, when you say quality education, teachers sometimes don't come to classrooms in poor countries, and even if they do, there's a lot of harassment involved, there's a lot of bad teaching involved, stuff like that. We're positioned in such a beautiful age that in the era of how we're connected to each other and how there's great knowledge. So for example, Julie before me spoke about Harvard. So when Harvard has all of their courses online, all we need is some robot to learn those courses and then to now teach those courses. So, I don't need one teacher to be able to cater to 10,000 people, because one teacher cannot. But one computer program probably can. You can scale it to put it into 100 computers. 100 computers can teach 100 people individually. So you make 10,000 people learning just by one computer program. And that's just only the education industry that can be transformed in such a large way using AI. When you go to healthcare, there's cancer prevention, there's so many cure detections, when you go to human resources, there's a lot more. Again, I personally I work with inFeedo, which is an AI and HR startup. And what we do is primarily along the lines of, speaking to employees at regular intervals, trying to understand their pulse of the organization. So if you guys, a lot of you might be going to school, a lot of you might be going to work, the first 15 days, you need someone to ask you, how was school? If you don't have somebody to talk to at home every day. At work, usually, when you're a lot older, when you're working, you don't have all of the bandwidth to speak at home every day about your work day, so like, this is what happened, this is what I did, my manager told me this, my boss told me this. So all of that is something we have conversations with employees to figure out how you're feeling in the organization. And at the end of, say, 1 or 2 months, we take all of this data, we make decisions, and we give them to the HR. And we say, okay, your employee in New Delhi, in the data sector, who is working under this particular manager, has a 65% likelihood of leaving the organization. And that's what I'm going to tell them in 2 months of conversation, because I know people like this person or people like that person in this age group are more likely to leave the organization. So the organization benefits by backfilling that role already. The person benefits by, if they're not about to leave that prominently, we speak to the employee, what's wrong with you? I see that somebody's telling me that you're upset with the organization. And when you do this at scale, because AI's power is to do this at scale in a connected era, which means one person, as in HR earlier, could not speak to, say, 20, 30, 40 people and at one day. Now we can speak to about 100,000 people in the same day, and we have 100,000 insights powered in the same day. So that's the scale AI operates at across industries. One of the key problems that I've noticed, and I've seen in whenever you're trying to start AI ventures, so I want you to think of all of these slides in respect to the venture that you're currently building, and how you can transform your current venture and your current pitch, whichever your problem statement is, to bring in AI into it. And one of the key problems that AI currently faces is that it is not inherently intelligent. So we as humans, a lot of you guys might be very familiar with the sector that you're in, or whatever problem statement that you have. When I say AI products are narrow, which means, so you hear about self-driving cars, you hear about programs that learn and do a certain task automatically. You hear about, in education sometimes, there are auto graders. There's, you give a rubric to something, you give a robot how to grade something, and they automatically grade 10,000, 20,000 applications or 10,000 submissions. So when I say AI products are narrow, which means that you teach it one particular task, and it will do that one task extremely well. And extremely well, which means you can scale that task to, it can learn about that task a lot better than humans probably can. All of the intricate data points that you might have never considered, that the AI can do. But what it cannot do is, say, for example, you guys have used the Google Assistant a lot, which means it is programmed to do some things extremely well, but some things that are outside of its purview, it's a little hard for it to learn. And if you say, for example, to the Google Assistant, like, I just got an example from somebody yesterday, in fact, what is the time where my uncle lives? So that's a question that, the Google Assistant is not probably expecting you to ask. And when you go outside of its purview, it can learn a little bit, but not too much. It's still going to be very restricted in what it's taught to do, what the purpose of the Google Assistant is, and that's where it belongs. I wouldn't say it's just a limitation of it. It is also extremely powerful to build your AI products that are narrow, which means you are targeting that one particular use case, and you are going to the bottom of it. And another example in this space would be, say, Nelson spoke of it the most in here, was I want to build a venture that is blockchain powered, or I want to build a venture that is AI powered. So what is the use case that you're trying to tackle with AI here? What is the use case that you're trying to tackle with blockchain here? Will be very interesting to see, because if there is one particular thing that you're trying to do, AI is currently being built. When I say narrow, I say it's more in an automation perspective. Humans have the tendency to believe that they are more strategic than robots. Like, we have our ego, we think that, what is this guy going to take decisions for me for? There's a lot of manual work that needs to be done in the organization. There are some 10,000 resumes somebody needs to parse. There are 50,000 applications somebody needs to review. All of that the robot can do. But how can the robot tell me that this is something I need to do for my business? My ego comes into play. I think I'm more strategic than the robot. So AI isn't even being built in a way that it can take strategic, intelligent decisions for humans right now. It will be powered alongside the things of, I have a manual task that needs to be done. I'm being built for automation, which is why AI products are being built very narrowly today. That is also their strength, that is also their weakness, whichever way you want to place them. This is the current scene of AI in the world today. So when everybody says, AI is going to take over, AI is going to start driving cars, start killing people, and it's when I say narrow AI and broad AI, this is the difference between the two, which means it can do that one particular task of finding a person in a big room extremely well. But that above is something that it cannot do. It cannot take over the world. It cannot start pressing numbers on a keyboard and start coding another AI that kills another human. Stuff like that is extremely, extremely far away right now. Watch the trend is something that I've personally seen and believed in the power of every time I've started and scaled an AI venture. It is, where is AI going to be used next, extremely big. And this is an example that I picked up from a book I was reading recently. It says, imagine the 90s era or early 2000s. I'm not sure how many of you were, sound and aware of that era that time, but in the early 2000s, there were, Nikon was big on cameras. Everybody was buying cameras, everybody's, buying expensive cameras. The market of cameras was huge. Suddenly, the smartphone revolution comes in. In probably 3 to 4 years, every camera guy is either, pivoting their business, doing something new, getting into smartphone cameras. Carl Zeiss lenses are now in Nokia phones. So, either you're pivoting your business to survive, or you're just shutting off. Because if you don't watch the trend, if you don't see where your industry is going, sometimes the wave of the industry will take you so much further than your product will take you. Which means if in 2004, I built a phone, even if it was the worst phone in the market, it would have sold a lot. Because in 2004, phones were selling. Which means my industry would take me so much further. I wouldn't have to put a 20 megapixel camera in my phone in 2004 to sell my phone. I could just make one phone, tell people, okay, this phone can communicate with that person sitting right across the room. And wherever they are, you can do that. Just gonna cost you a little bit of money. That industry trend would have taken me so much further than building a very fancy phone. That same way, watching the trend also goes the other way, which means if in 2004, I started building cameras, I would be nowhere, because it's a very capital intensive business. You're spending a lot of R&D, you're making cameras. Suddenly in 2004, nobody needs cameras. So what are you purchasing, buying, and selling cameras for? So that's why watch the trend would ideally mean whichever industry your startups are in. So all of you guys have some problem statements that you've worked with. All of you are in particular industries. Is that industry trend, started to use AI a lot? Maybe is there a lot of manual work that you guys can make a little more intelligent? If you can scale what you're doing at large intents, if you can watch that trend with your industry, I think it'll be a lot more beneficial for you. So when you say, for example, I'm going to start a new AI venture, there are 3 broad points that you can keep in mind when you're starting a venture. These are the 3 main things that will make you very different from the others. So when they say, what is your USP as an AI product, or what is something that differentiates you? And there is one standard differentiator that you may say, we do adaptive learning in education a little bit differently. We have a new framework, we have a different algorithm, but that's just one part of the piece. Your data and the distance is something I'll cover. Your data is basically domain specific, is the first thing that you need to separate yourself from the others, which means an education AI startup. So if you say, I'm not going to do an AI startup because, and I've heard this a lot from people, Google is so big on AI, and say IBM is so big on AI, that I'll never be able to get into that space because IBM is going to kill me anyway. What do I do competing with someone that big? So your key differentiator and your strength in this space would be that you are domain specific, which means currently, if I say we as a product inFeedo have a lot of data on human resource specific domains, which means if you are an employee with a certain company, you talk to me every day, you give me feedback, that kind of data is very, it's impossible for anybody else to have that kind of data. And since AI's fuel is primarily data, if you're feeding it data, then the data is your core. I mean, so much data that you collect from certain domains, very specific niches, is your core. And it's, for example, since I've worked with Udacity in the past, in their analytics team as well, a lot of analytics we collected on student behavior, student learning, which means how do you have learning patterns? A lot of you here will experience that as well. Some people can spend 4 hours to complete a certain task. Some people spend 10 hours. Some people spend 2 days doing it slowly. So there's different learning curves for everybody. There's different learning patterns. Not everybody learns in the same pace, in the same way. And that is the data we had in the education sector, which means we have different personas for different people. And how important data actually is something, this is just an opinion that I had, was, a lot of you have heard of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So you guys hear about how they're going to certain places in, say, even Africa, India, Bangladesh. They go to a lot of places at the base of these, so like they go to the tier 10th city and try to help out refugees, try to help out a lot of people. I believe personally Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation will unlock industries maybe in the next 10, 15 years that nobody has ever thought of. They are at ground zero, collecting data that you guys have never heard of. They're collecting data on refugees, they're collecting data on refugees' behavior, country, immigrants. There's so much data at the bottom of where Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is working. And a lot of these NGOs, their data will unlock industries, and there's so much their data can power that the world cannot see today. This is something that will come off as something that a lot of you guys might have seen for the first time or something, but I see, and I recently faced this as well, how far your AI offering is from the person who is the economic buyer. And I was explaining economic buyer and end user to somebody yesterday, which means if you are a school, for example, you're selling as a school, not to the student, but to the parent, which means you need to find how to sell to the parent. You need to find what does a parent want from their student. So you put school ads in places where parents usually go with that kind of a mindset, maybe newspapers. Dads and moms read newspapers early in the morning in some countries, and lots of countries. So in fact, when you put a school ad in the front page, everybody thinks they start their day with, okay, my child is going to go to this great school, do some 10 great things, whichever. So your economic buyer is the person who will pay money for your product. If you're a school, a parent will pay money for you, not the child. So don't try to convince the child into thinking it's a great, great education, because that child is 4 years old, doesn't know what you're trying to sell to him. So distance from the buyer ideally means, in the AI perspective, is currently, I'll explain it to you in our standpoint, is inFeedo has a bot that speaks to 100,000, 200,000 employees all across the globe. So if the bot is extremely intelligent and the insights that I get out of it are not all of that intelligent, my buyer will think, okay, currently I may not be paying for something that I need to be intelligent for the user, which means if I'm trying to collect feedback from this room, I need intelligent feedback to come to me because I'm paying for a product that needs to give me intelligent insights on this room. If my product is intelligently speaking to all of you and giving, dumps of data to me, I will not pay for it because it's not intelligent to me. It's intelligent for the end user, which currently I probably might not be in the best place to pay for. So distance from the buyer I've seen is extremely important, because when you say it's artificially intelligent, it might not just be for the end user, it also needs to be for everybody involved in that cycle, from the economic buyer to the last person who's using it. And this, I think you guys have heard a lot across the day, so I'm not going to spend more time on it. When you say you do AI, how do you do it differently? I mean, when you say you do blockchain, for example, how do you do it differently? And when you check out the current venture capital standpoint in a lot of countries, and I've been speaking about venture capital to some teams, it's how buzzwords like AI and blockchain have kind of, polluted the minds of VCs so much that now if you go to a venture capitalist and say, okay, I am an AI company that does this, so he'll stop you at AI, she'll stop you at AI. They'll be like, okay, well, why don't you explain what you're doing to me separately? So they scrutinize it so much now because it's being used excessively as a buzzword. So if you use the word AI in your startup, or if you use the word blockchain in your startup, be prepared for scrutinizing, because what are you really doing that's different? If you're a Me Too thing, like if you're just using open source algorithms that you have no idea about, and if it's not even an AI problem, then I'm going to scrutinize you. I'm not going to pay you money if you don't know what you're doing. I think I'm coming to the end of how to tackle that. Would be when you've set up something initially, and now when you're trying to scale it, how do you go about building AI into your venture? I mean, the first question is, when you say I am an AI-powered startup, do you need to be AI-powered? What is the need for you to bring in AI into your solution? Is it because it's a buzzword? Is it because it sells well? Why do you need AI in your startup? And something I call the value creation filter is something I've used personally at inFeedo as well, is when you say you're bringing in AI solution into your product, it either saves 10x of my time doing a task that would take me 10x more time. It's bringing that time down. Either it's saving me 10x money, it's saving me money on what I do, or it's enabling for 10x reach, which means I'll give you a base example of, say, AI in HR is something that I'm doing. When I speak to employees at regular intervals to try to find out how they're feeling about the organization, when they're going to leave, if they're going to leave, if I check with them on, if how this saves 10x of my time, is one HR person could not probably go to 50,000 employees and speak to them. It saves a lot more than just 10x of my time. It saves 10x of my money because I don't have to employ so many people to speak to employees currently. And even if I do that, when I can predict when my employee is going to leave, I can also backfill that role a lot better and save money on someone leaving the organization. It costs a lot to replace somebody who's left, and that money can be saved here. Enables 10x reach, because if I have 10 HR managers in my organization who can speak to 20 people separately, I make for 200 people spoke to. My bot can speak to 200,000 people. So the reach is gone more than 10x. But this is a value creation filter you guys can personally use in a lot of ventures that you're doing. If it's not solving for 10x time, 10x money, or 10x reach, it is not necessarily an AI problem. It could be something else. Maybe explore what you can do in this space. It could be automation. It could be basic statistics. It need not be AI. It might not even be automation. Mastering the value creation filter is one of my professors from Southern New Hampshire University. And she's into the space of education and how she's empowering education. In a lot of African countries, is SNHU has something of an algorithm that they're using to, and I'll tell you, I'll relate it to how it's fitting the value creation filter the best, is when you say, there's a lot of US universities or places that you want to go to, but tuition fee is extremely high. And any foreign university that you want to go to outside of your country, and sometimes it costs too much. It only costs too much because there are certain parameters adding to that cost. Adding to that cost is the time that teachers spend in teaching the students, getting expensive teachers, making them judge and assess assignments that students get. So SNHU's AI algorithm currently is penetrating to the, a lot of other cities, but also to the depths of Canada and the depths of Africa, where it's going, and what it's doing is, if say I get 100, 200 assessments from students, when I get those assessments, one teacher assessing 200 assessments is going to take a lot of time. If we can do that extremely fast, it saves 10x of my time. It saves 10x of my money if I just have to employ one teacher to do that. I don't have to employ 10, 20 teachers just to grade assignments. That's going to save my money. With that saved money, SNHU is now reducing tuition fees in the US universities, because putting all of that money into lower tuition fees, into grants, into scholarships, will mean more people can come to my university if I save a lot of costs on teachers, if I save a lot of costs on grading. So I think this is a great example a lot of you guys could explore. They're still in pilot phase. So one sec. They're still in pilot phase, but they're doing extremely well on all of these 3 parameters that I mentioned, because if you save money eventually, saving time, saving money, you can enable reach by giving out the money that you save in scholarships and grants. This is the second last thing that I want to touch up on, is your blockchain or your AI need not be extremely, extremely intelligent. It need not be the best tech out there. Because we've seen in the past that the best tech cannot be productized the best way. And a great example of this is a lot of you guys might have seen, if you follow the Google I/O, you've seen the Google Duplex. Google Duplex is an AI bot that can make phone calls for you, make reservations for you in certain places. There was a very common video that went out, and even if you think about self-driving cars in today's industry, self-driving cars are positioned to be one of the greatest tech innovations that there is, flying cars, autonomous flying vehicles. But it's very hard to productize those things because I can't just randomly today bring a self-driving car and put it in the streets of Bangkok. It's probably going to kill 2-3 people because I can't. It's not trained for my roads. It's trained for US roads. It's trained for roads where there's a lot of discipline, there's a lot of data around those cities, those countries. If I bring it into even say India, it doesn't know because in the US, primarily, and this is from what I have seen of it, is you're not going to have 10, 20 people suddenly crossing the road, right? That happens big in a lot of countries around this region. You're not going to have animals crossing the road randomly. So car knows when to stop when there's a person coming. But what is this animal doing here? Like, what do I do as a car? Do I stop? Do I go forward? There was a great incident I heard about earlier. Was when a lady was walking with one of those prams with a baby inside. The car will know to stop at the lady, but it doesn't know what a pram is. It might just go hit that pram. So you've lost the baby. And that's the thing with great tech. It might not add the best value to what you're trying to do. So if you're trying to teach or if you're trying to be an education startup who does AI so well that it's adaptive, people learn based on their learning patterns. But the problem with that would be they don't know what they're learning anymore. You're taking them in directions and curves. They don't even know what they're getting out of it. So they'll stop using it. And this is the last thing I want to touch up on is impact visual schemas, impact measurable KPIs, which means I'm not sure which table I was at yesterday, but when I say measurable KPIs, it's going to bring my bottom line a little up. It's going to help me save this much money exactly. It's going to help me save 40 man hours. It's a lot more better than I'm going to put a student into adaptive education. Because, and how I explained this earlier was, if I say the word pineapple to you, what do you guys think of in your head? Do you have a visual image in your head? If I say watermelon, you have a visual image in your head. If I say honesty, you guys are going to take a little longer to figure out what I really mean by honesty. You guys now will have 10 different pictures in your head. It's not a visual schema that you can personally relate to. You'll have to think a little bit about when you found honesty last. Now if I say adaptive, intelligent education, you're thinking, what is it going to do to me? Like, what do I get now? If I pay for it, what is my outcome? I don't see what I'm paying money for. If it's adaptive, intelligent education, what do I learn at the end of this? Is it measurable? Can I put a dollar value to it? Can I put an hour value to it? If I can't, your sales cycle is going to be a little longer. And I think that's most of what I want to touch up on. If there's any questions, I'd love to take them now.
Yeah, I agree with you that AI has created a great impact in society. But what if AI gets more intelligent than human? Is it a complete threat to humanity?
It's so this question is big in the industry. It is far from being anything beyond narrow. Currently, it is solving for very little use cases, but solving them extremely well. Because when you say, for example, AI can play chess now, AI can play chess a lot better than anybody in the world can play chess. But that same AI cannot drive that car. Which means for that same AI to drive a car, there's so much more effort involved into training it into two different things. And I personally believe it's time for, it's got a lot of time before it becomes intelligent and takes over humans. So that's a couple of decades away. It's time.
Okay, thank you.
We've seen in the past few years HR using different approaches to hiring, for instance, like graduates or in entry-level positions such as internships and stuff. So what happened before, at least in my country, about 3 years back, when you applied for a job with like your big corporations, what you would do is you would obviously apply online and then you go for psychometric tests, etc. So now we're seeing a trend where a lot of the big corporations, but they've been doing it for longer globally, but in the country itself, you have them developing these games to sort of not test your actual, like your technical skills for like a certain function, but they really want to understand how you think in certain situations and stuff. Has that got anything to do with AI? And if so, what is the reason for that approach?
The reason for that approach would be very personal to which company wants to pick it up. So I wouldn't be able to touch up on what is the reason for that approach. Because if I am company A, my reason for that approach will be very different from company B. So my why is very different from somebody else's why. Currently, what happens it happens in a lot of leadership positions, in fact, that I need to be able to understand a person who's joining in my team a lot better because they will be leading a team. They will be leading my organization. I need to be very careful with the decisions that they make. I need to be very careful with understanding if they are emotionally stable to do what I'm trying to tell them to do. If they have like a very irrational behavior, if they have a rash personality to just take decisions left, right, and center without thinking about outcomes, I don't want that for my company. I don't want it to impact so many employees that I have. I don't want it to impact, cash burn. So all of that is one of the reasons why AI and psychometry is used before you bring in somebody into the org. But your why could be different based on each company. Yep.
All right. Hello, I'm Asif from Bangladesh. So as you said, AI is saving 10x time, money, and reach.
I would like it to. Yeah.
You'd like it to. Okay. So in the near future, everybody will try to automate 100% of the system according to AI.
True.
So then, why a venture will need a CEO? Then what will be the job of a CEO in the company?
So when you say AI will automate things, a CEO will still take strategic discussions. As I said, AI is currently not intelligent enough to make strategic decisions. It'll make your narrow decisions extremely well. So when you say most of an organization can be automated, a lot of decisions can be automated. AI in fact is creating more jobs than it's burning out, which means the current need. So as AI comes into the picture a lot more, one of the key things that also needs to be brought up is quality education, which means you will always have to keep reskilling, keep upskilling yourself. You will not be stagnated, which is great for human beings as well. We will not be in a same place doing the same job for 50 years. We will always constantly feel the need to learn more, to upskill, to keep developing. AI, for example, I'll give you a job of something that it kills versus something that it creates. A common example is the job of a liftman, in fact. It's not really AI that's killed it. But a kill job, say for example, is a person who used to operate lifts, sit in the lift and press buttons for you or take you places. So now when you kill that job, you also generate like thousands of other jobs, which means now that lifts are being manufactured, some people need to be in factories, some people need to be doing sales for those lifts, some people need to be customer success managers, business development. There's an ecosystem that you create around the job that you burn, which means you just remove a liftman, but you add a lift, and everybody that supports in building that lift and selling that lift is the new jobs that you've created. So you create a lot more than you burn.
Thank you.
So as you said, for AI to actually work, we need a lot of data.
Yep.
But in the company as yours, you need a large amount of personal data, right? And by personal, I mean which is specific to some people, and you cannot find it publicly.
True.
So how did you start this venture? Because in order for it to work, you have to actually have the database. But in order to have a database, you have to be working with the company. But before having a product, you cannot work with the company. So
absolutely.
How does this system work of collecting the data?
This is a question that I preempted 2 weeks ago, and I wanted to add a slide on AI privacy and ethics. I stopped.
No, it's not about the ethics. It's not about the ethics. It is about
how you get the data.
It is about how do you get the data before actually starting the business?
So two ways to do that is either you go open source for a start. It's called a vanilla launch, which means you start with using basic open source algorithms, APIs. Once you have a lot of data of your own, then you contextualize. So in the AI scheme of things, there's something called transfer learning. I can catch up with you on that offline as well. But transfer learning is basically when your AI model or algorithm has been trained on generic data, you use that as a vanilla launch so that everybody is also satisfied because it's generic. But as you keep getting more data, you keep learning and you keep contextualizing your AI to the data that you now have. So you never begin domain specific, but you get domain specific. You can begin with generic models.
Thank you.
Now I think I've opened up a question on
It's a
privacy.
Yes. Okay, guys. Juliet.
Hi, Shantanu.
Hi.
I wanted to ask one thing since you are working in the HR field. So the task you are doing for the employees are generally, the task in corporations what managers are supposed to do. They are supposed to look after, their teammates and look after them. So the main problem in a corporation is not that the managers it is a problem that the managers are not efficient enough to do that work and cannot see after each and every, person. But as I feel, the biggest problem which we face is we are not open to someone who is evaluating us. So a manager is someone who is going to evaluate us. So if you sell your product in a way that it's gonna evaluate and it's gonna tell what kind of thinking you have and when are you going to leave the company to the HR, then how do you convince employee to just talk to the robot frankly? Means that's one of the biggest things what we also face when we make prototypes for AI. That when you stand in front of a camera and the camera is going to evaluate you, it makes you conscious. So how do you deal with that?
So two parts of that question I'll answer one by one. The first was when you said managers are supposed to be doing that, but they're not efficient enough. Now, what we're selling is time saved and money saved. The current space of the economy and the current space of how industries are going is very competitive. If I have 100 hours of my time in a day, assuming I have 100% of time in a day, if I spend 20% of that, which I currently usually am supposed to do or would do, speaking to the people that report to me, I'm wasting 20% of my bandwidth that I am equipped to use into business, make economic value out of that. I bring that 20% to 5%, which means now the manager doesn't have to go talk to everybody, just has to solve problems that he knows about, she knows about. That is where I sell my product as a USP of saving time of people, adding more economic value to the business. Second is, how do you get people to talk? All of the feedback that we get is not directed, it's mostly how we bucket it, is kind of a place where we give top view, macro insights. We don't give them to HR line managers, we usually give them to HR leaderships. So for example, if you have Genpact, for example, Genpact has 80,000, 100,000 users, General Electric. Now, I will tell the HR, the business unit leader of that, for example, if I say in New Delhi, under the data business unit, in this specific location of say whatever, XYZ, these are the problems that employees are facing. So I'm not gonna pinpoint and say, okay, this guy has a problem with his salary because his manager is paid more and he's paid less. He thinks his manager is incompetent, he should be paid more than his manager. I'm not gonna do that. But it's very top view, so that decision making can be more channelized and not specific to a certain person, because you're not really solving for scale if you're telling everybody that, okay, this guy has this problem, this guy has this problem. If I tell you in a room of 100 different problems, you'll never be able to solve for scale anyway, and you'll never be able to create impact. But if I tell you that these two tables in this specific room have a problem with how something is structured, you'll be able to solve that a lot better, a lot faster. So I think we solve that by giving macro insights. Even the users that talk to us know that we're not going to be pinpointing them, it's going to be macro. So I think that's how we solve for response rates. I hope that answers.
Yeah, but then that is from the HR's perspective, you're helping the HR. But then when you're selling this product, your product, when it becomes available to the customers, they are interacting with the bot, single-handedly. So they don't know that you will be, what you'll be sending to the HR.
Oh no, they know. So
But
we have
means in a customer's point of view, means from an employee's point of view, they generally, what I can say means it's a personal interaction with the bot. So even if you're sending, means it's just an evaluation point. If you're evaluating something, you become conscious to it. So means I had a thought about it. So
True.
can you do something like this, that you make a friendly bot? So like in an office space, you are more comfortable talking to someone who is not at an evaluation, point for yourself. So like your friends, so you can talk to your friends. You can talk to your friends about everything, almost everything.
Yep.
So can you, like bifurcate this product so that you can sell this to HRs in a certain kind of way, and kind of manipulate or kind of sell this to customers in a different kind of way, or the employees to a different kind of way?
So I think this taps into the slide of distance from the buyer a little bit as well, which means, say I have our current positioning of a bot, we call her Amber is an employee engagement bot, which is, empathetic bot, speaks to you at regular intervals, try to understand what you feel about the org. There's something that's a different module within Amber. It's called the anonymous bat. And we back these using something that we call the trust statement. So we tell the employees that, your feedback is not going to be directed to you, pointed towards you, XYZ. We say all of that, but we also, while we say that, and eventually you build trust. You don't start off with a bowl of trust. So eventually when we build trust using our trust disclaimers and statements, and they finally eventually realize that their feedback is not being used against them, while they're realizing, they also have a different module called the anonymous bat, which means if you feel it's going to be used against you, we will anonymously have you send it out anyway. So I think these are the ways we're tackling it right now. There's of course not a perfect solution to this, but I think trust is something that you build a long time. You just don't land up with a bowl of trust. Yeah.